Good evening, and welcome back to the Light the W podcast. It's episode 104 of the show. And Jorge Polanco will not be a Mariner in 2026. We talked about the possibility really twice last week for bits of time about Jorge Polanco re-signing with the Mariners, whether that was at the winter meetings or after the winter meetings. And it seemed like it was possible. It sounded like the Mariners were the top target for Jorge Polanco, and they wanted him. We don't know what the exact deal they offered was, but he signed with the Mets for 2 years and $40 million. $20 million a year, which was beyond what the Mariners were willing to offer rightfully. So, on today's episode, we will briefly talk about that signing of Jorge Polanco and what it means for the rest of the Mariners offseason and 2026 that they haven't signed him. We'll go over 3 trade targets that the Mariners might look to since he is off the board, 2 of which we've briefly talked about so far, and 1 I have purposefully not mentioned but has been rumored heavily to be of interest to your Seattle Mariners. So, 90 seconds in, without further ado, sound the horn. Okay, so like I mentioned in the intro, Jorge Polanco, 2 years, $40 million to go to Queens and play as a New York Met for the next 2 seasons. I was on a plane home from Los Angeles when this news broke, and I won't lie, I was a little bit shocked. In the days prior to that signing, I actually felt confident he was going to be a Mariner. It felt like he was waiting out the market, seeing if he could get another offer, or else he was going to go back to Seattle or see if he can get Seattle to raise their offer. It seemed like he wanted to be a Mariner in 2026 and beyond. It seemed like he was comfortable here, that he liked it here, but Seattle wasn't willing to buff up their offer to the extent of which Jorge Polanco wanted. Jorge Polanco released his farewell message to the Mariners today, and it was a teary-eyed read, to say the least. I won't lie. It definitely came across as though he wanted to be a Mariner. He wanted to bring a championship to this city, to this fan base, to this organization. But obviously that's not going to be the case for Jorge Polanco. Who knows what the Mariners do, but at least for Jorge Polanco, he will not be winning a championship in Seattle. And what it means for the Mariners offseason is their number 1 target for the rest of this offseason is off the board, especially their number 1 free agent target. He was the guy that they were willing to go give up a little bit of a contract to, other than Josh Naylor, obviously, who they already gave a contract to. We'll see what else happens in this offseason, but it seems as though they're going to pivot and look to trade in order to upgrade their lineup. We might see them utilize free agency to acquire a bullpen arm, but that's not today's topic. In terms of the contract Jorge Polanco got, I understand why the Mariners didn't go there, and I kind of agree that they probably shouldn't have gone there. $20 million for a guy that has been injured pretty much all of the last 5 years. Last year was his first healthy season, and he even dealt with injuries for part of the season where he had to DH. He couldn't play in the field. He couldn't hit from the right side. He was still able to put up good numbers, and he had a career year for him, which led to him getting these $20 million a year and the $40 million total. But you can understand why a Mariners team that is limited on budget already didn't want to go to the $40 million that Polanco got. It's the type of move that would have eaten up much, if not all, of the rest of the Mariners' budget this offseason. And if you're the Mariners and you're looking to add at least 1 bat and 1 more reliever, that would have limited you in both those realms. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't want Jorge Polanco back. I desperately did. I really thought he was the perfect fit in terms of who is left on the market for the Mariners to go and get and who would be able to fit in their price range. You look at all the rest of the guys on the market, and the 3 guys I'm going to talk about today, each one of them has a flaw, for lack of a better term, that makes him a little bit questionable in terms of an addition for the Mariners. We're going to talk about the guy that I think is the least realistic first. We'll then talk about the guy that I think could be realistic, but that I don't want as much as the last guy, who we all know is my favorite target, and he seems like the most likely, and he seems like he could drop any time in the next few days to the next week. It feels like that move might happen before Christmas, but that's purely speculation. So 5 minutes in, Jorge Polanco, 2 years, $40 million. It's a deal I understand why the Mariners didn't do, and I probably wouldn't have done it if I was also in their shoes with their budget restrictions. And with Jorge Polanco's injury history, I don't think it's a great contract, especially for a Mariners team that needs multiple additions and that really can't spend that type of money unless it's a guy that they know is going to be their guy for those years that he is signed for. The first trade target we're going to talk about is a guy that's actually somewhat similar to that discussion I just had about money. It's a former Mariner, a guy that Jerry Dipoto actually traded early in his tenure with the Mariners for a guy that ended his Mariners tenure just 9 or 10 months ago. Obviously, that guy that I'm talking about is Ketel Marte, who the Mariners traded alongside Taijuan Walker for Gene the hitting machine and Mitch Haniger, both of which were pretty great Mariners, to say the least. Since Ketel Marte left, he has become really a star, especially after the COVID pandemic. These last 2 years have been the best 2 years of his career in terms of F4. 2019, when it was the juiced ball season, was tied for his best season in terms of F4, where he was worth nearly 6.5 wins. The other year he did that was 2024, just 2 years ago. Last year was his second highest F4 of his career, where he put up nearly 5 wins. This is a guy that can play second base, could dabble in shortstop, and has played a little bit of center field in his career, but that seems pretty much out of the question, especially after one of his last years being remarkably bad in terms of both outs above average and defensive runs saved, both defensive metrics, of course. That said, Ketel Marte is a very, very good bat. We're going to talk about his bat first, then his glove, and then we will talk about the contract situation, why I don't think he makes a ton of sense for the Mariners to trade for. Starting off with what he is best at, this is a truly elite hitter in baseball. His 145 WRC plus, 45% above league average last year, ranked 7th in baseball. He hit 283, which was 22nd. His 376 on base percentage ranked 8th, and his 517 slug ranked 15th in baseball. This is a top 10 to 15 hitter in baseball overall, if not even better than that. His 4.6 F4 ranked 24th in baseball. This is a guy that strikes out 11%, or strikes out 15% of the time, and walks 11.5% of the time. Last year, he hit 28 home runs, 28 doubles as a Diamondback, had 72 RBIs, and played just 126 games. This comes to the first red flag of him. Ketel Marte is a guy that doesn't play a ton of games. He hasn't played a full season since 2023, and even then it was only 150 games. In 2025, he played 126, 2024, 136, and 137 in 2022, and 90 in 2021. Since that COVID pandemic, where I said he really came into the stardom and star player that he is, he hasn't really had a full season unless you consider 150 games a whole season, which it basically is, missing just 12 games. That 2023 season, of course, he was good, but since then he has kicked it into another gear. Like I said, in terms of F4, 2024 and 2025 are pretty much his best 2 years, and I'm just going to disregard 2019 because of the juiced ball and juiced up stats that it produced for pretty much everyone around the league. Marte is all around a good hitter. I mentioned it earlier. 8th in on base last year, 22nd in average, 15th in slug. This is a guy with 25, 30, maybe even 35 home run power, but already on the wrong side of 30, age 32 years old. He's only going to decline. He hasn't had that happen yet, still in the 85th percentile on bat speed, and he's producing with that. 96th percentile in expected batting average, 94th in expected slug. He doesn't strike strike out a lot, and he walks at a pretty good rate, around the 84th, 85th percentile in both metrics. He's not the fastest guy, just the 29th sprint speed in baseball. But like I said, aging wise, his bat speed hasn't declined that much in the 85th percentile. That's led to him having the 83rd percentile in barrel percentage and not whiffing a whole lot, just 22.5% of the time, which is in the 63rd percentile. In 2024, he hit 36 home runs and was above average as a defender with 8 outs above average, which was in the 93rd percentile. Leading us into the glove, for the most part, this is an average glove at second base, maybe slightly above average. He was in the 74th percentile of outs above average this last year, putting up just 1 out above average. That's talking about range. 2024, like I said, 8 outs above average, which was in the 93rd percentile. That's the best defensive year of his career, though. Disregarding that, he's average to slightly above average. Over the last 3 seasons, he's just played 3 innings of shortstop, and he hasn't played outfield since 2023. This has led him to become pretty much a primary second baseman, if not fully a primary second baseman, which has allowed him to focus on the bat, in my opinion. This has led, like I said, to his best 2 seasons of his career, especially at the plate. But his glove has also gone up a tick because of that and has allowed him to really focus on second base and allow that to become what he's best at. That said, defensive runs saved doesn't like him as much as outs above average does. 1 defensive run saved this last year, that's about average. So looking at second base, 10 in 2024. Again, that's the best defensive years of his career. 2 defensive runs saved in 2023, which is the last time, like I said, that he played outfield. In 2022, when he was more of a shortstop, second base, outfield utility type of guy, outs above average ranked -6, or defensive runs saved, pardon, was -6, which obviously is below average. That said, this is an elite level bat, a top 10 bat, with an average to slightly above average glove at second base. 32 years old, Marte is signed for 6 more years if you include his player option for $11.5 million that he very likely would take in his age 37 season. Obviously, that means you get him through his 37-year-old season, at which point you wonder what type of production he's putting up. The Diamondbacks backloaded his contract, so it only continually goes up for the rest of his career until that player option for $11.5 million. Averaging just $19.75 million per year, it seems like it's likely a pretty affordable contract. And even so, it is. For his age 32 season, he's making $16 million in 2026, goes down to $12 million in 2027, and then this is where it gets bad. Once he hits that age 34 season, he's making $20 million. 35 is 22, 36 is 22, and that age 37, like I said, would likely be $11.5 million, assuming he takes the player option. And by those last few years of his contract, he very likely isn't going to be putting up the same level of production that he's put up, especially these last 2 years, but really for the majority of his career. There are some locker room mismatch type of knick-knack things that were dealt with in the Diamondbacks locker room and clubhouse last season. In my opinion, those are mostly overblown. The contract is the reason I don't think this makes sense for the Mariners. That on top of the trade cost, where the Diamondbacks are looking for a major league starter, the Mariners would be subtracting from their major league roster in adding him. And then they'd be limiting what they could spend for the next 6 years, especially the next 5 years. That $16 million that he is making would be one of the more expensive contracts that the Mariners have. And it would eat up a good chunk of the rest of their payroll this year. That $16 million would be tied with Randy Arozarena, who's projected to make 16 in ARB, for 5th on the club. That sounds about right. At $16 million for a bat of Ketel Marte's caliber, actually is fairly affordable. But when you get into those $22 million contract years in 2029 and 2030, when he's 35 and 36 years old, that's when the problems start to arise. And if you want to go look at those years, 2029, where he would make $22 million a year, the Mariners have 3 guaranteed contracts that year. Julio Rodriguez is set to make about 17.5, as is Cal Raleigh. Josh Naylor's projected about $18.5 million. He would be the most expensive of all three of those guys and would very, very easily be the oldest of those three guys. It's difficult to know how a guy is going to age, but for a guy that hasn't played a full season much, if at all, in this decade, and really much in his career, a guy that's already on the wrong side of 30 is past his prime, probably just had his two best years of his career that he'll ever have. It feels like the perfect time for the Diamondbacks to trade him with his contract getting more expensive and with him about to likely tail off in terms of value. If the Mariners have to trade one of their top three prospects in Ryan Sloan, Cade Anderson, or Colt Emerson alongside or alone without one of the Mariners' major league starters, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That said, if it's an Emerson Hancock and one of their later prospects, say it's a Felnin Celestin, and maybe even Terangelo St. alongside that, maybe you could talk me into it. But it's a type of deal that would limit the Mariners' future. And for a team that is draft and develop, that's going to limit a lot of your identity as an organization, as a club. Moving on to a guy with just 1 year of control, it would be a rental. This is a guy compared to Jorge Polanco just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. It's Brandon Lowe of the Tampa Bay Rays. 31 years old, Brandon Lowe put up a 114 WRC plus last year. He is a second baseman that should likely play DH because his glove is bad, to say the least. He was in the first percentile of outs above average, with negative 13 outs above average and negative 14 defensive runs saved last year. It is a DH that cannot hit lefties. Before we get into those splits, though, let's talk about the good stuff with Brandon Lowe. 256, 307, 477 with a 114 WRC plus. Put up just over a win and a half. Walked 7% of the time, but he struck out 27% of the time. That said, hit 31 home runs with 19 doubles. It can absolutely slug. That said, this guy gets hurt often, 134 games only this last year, which is the most games he's played in any of the last 4 years. He whiffs a lot, strikes out a lot, but he can hit the ball hard, puts his barrel on it, and can slug in the 81st percentile on X-slug and barrel percentage. But like I said, strikes out 27% of the time, which is in the 12th percentile. And he whiffs in the 4th percentile 33.5% of the time. As I get into the stuff alongside the glove that I don't love about this guy, he's just a 49 WRC plus versus lefties last year. And like I said, those 134 games are the most he's played in any of the last 4 years. 107 games in 2024, 109 in 23, and only 65 in 2022. The most games he's played in his career were in 2021 when he played 149 games. He's been injured every season of his career. Over the last 4 years, he's only played 110 games plus once, and that was just this last year when he played 134. Am I blowing these injury concerns out of proportion? Possibly. But for a team that would be trading future value and value potentially now and later this season, doing that for a guy that might not be on the field is a huge risk. And a guy that, let's face it, might not be all that much, if any, better than what Cole Young might be. We don't know what Cole Young is going to be, and it's not fair to put that pressure on him. But Brandon Lowe is a guy that gets injured, that really is just a platoon hitter at DH, because he can't defend and is making $11.5 million this year. At 31 years old, he's on the wrong side of 30. The Mariners definitely or very likely wouldn't re-sign this guy. And the Rays would probably want a fairly decent player in return. But just 1 year, it would not be the highest trade cost. And if you can't get Ketel Marte or Brendan Donovan, who I'll talk about next, maybe he does make sense to acquire on the cheap. But it all depends on that trade cost because this is a very risky addition that might not be on the field for you much, if at all, this season. Moving on, let's talk about my favorite of these three guys and the guy that I think is very likely the most likely of these three guys to be traded to the Seattle Mariners. That guy is Brendan Donovan. We're going to go a little bit more into depth about this guy. And if you want to hear a full breakdown of Donovan, go listen to episode 96 of the show where I did a full breakdown earlier this offseason. Let's start with the bat for Donovan. Over his career, he is a 119 WRC plus who has hit 282, 361, and 411 in his career. He has just 40 home runs in 492 games, has put up over 10 wins on Fangraphs, has nearly 100 doubles, 5 triples, and nearly 500 hits in his career. Strikes out 13.5% of the time over his career and walks just about 9% of the time. This last year was a good year for him where he put up that 119 WRC plus that he's averaged over his career. He ranked 18th in average in baseball, hitting 287, was on base 353, and that slug was 422, which is above his career norm. He had 10 home runs in 118 games, put up 3 wins nearly, and had 32 doubles, which was 27th in baseball. He had 132 hits to lead to that 287 average, walked over 8% of the time, he struck out just 13th% of the time. That's the 14th lowest in baseball. He had the highest barrel rate of his career at 8.8%, but he doesn't produce a ton of power. This is a guy that's going to walk at an okay rate, about average, but is going to be able to put the ball in play and hit for solid average. Adding a 280 hitter at the top of the Mariners lineup is a great addition that you would love to see. This is a guy that would likely lead off for your team, and that's been a good player for majority of his career. 2024, he had a 115 WRC plus, put up over 3 wins, played 153 games, hit 14 homers, hit 278, 342, 417, had 34 doubles and 163 hits. His walk rate was just over 7% of the time, and that strikeout rate is below 12.5. Hard hit rate, 37.5%, which was the lowest of his career. Normally, he sits around 40%. This last year, he was in the 95th percentile in whiff percentage, 92nd in K percentage, and 96th in squared up rate. He's in the 93rd percentile in expected batting average at 285, 67th in X slug, 78th in X wOBA. Doesn't hit the ball incredibly hard, below average, in fact, in the 40th percentile. He's in the 47th in barrel rate, 46th in average exit velocity. Doesn't have a ton of bat speed, which leads him not to hit the ball incredibly hard, just the 13th percentile in bat speed. Chases not that much in the 70th percentile. Walks average, like I said, in the 50th percentile. But this is a guy that's going to put the ball in play. He hits a lot of singles and he hits for high average, which is something that the Mariners don't have a lot in their lineup. Josh Naylor is like that, but Donovan does it to an even greater extent. Naylor has that pop that Donovan kind of lacks. In his career versus left-handed pitching, Donovan hasn't been the greatest hitter. He's been below average with an 88 WRC plus. Career OPS of 651 and just 2 home runs against lefties in 503 plate appearances and 110 hits. This last year, he put up a 75 WRC plus, 25% below league average, and had an OPS of 614. 2024, though, was better. A 90 WRC plus, a 671 OPS, just an 11% strikeout rate, and a 6% walk rate. 2023 was more similar to 2025, in fact, worse. A 69 WRC plus, OPS below 600, no extra base hits, strikeout rate of 16%, and a walk rate of 9.5%. This is a guy that mostly is going to smash righties, but still isn't going to do it for a ton of power. Could he play up in T-Mobile Park with right field? It's possible. but he would be hitting leadoff for you, and his job would be to set the table in front of Julio Rodriguez, Cal Raleigh, and Josh Naylor. That said, he's not the fastest guy, below average sprint speed, and he doesn't have the greatest glove. That said, he can play multiple spots on the diamond. 2025, he played 100 games at second base, 18 in left field, and 6 at shortstop. 2023, he played first base, second base, third base, shortstop, left field, and right field. He's been a below average defender at second base throughout most of his career with a DRS of -5 over the course of his career. Over his career at third base, he has a DRS of 6, and he had a DRS of 7 in 2022 when he played 189 innings at third base. He's about average in both corners, but he's worsened and gotten worse every year of his career as he's gotten older. The Mariners would likely want to mix him around, especially because he would be a useful piece to be able to get multiple young guys playtime. He hasn't played right field since 2023, which would mean he's mostly a left fielder if he's playing in the outfield, which is secured mostly by Randy Arozarena. That said, it would allow Randy Arozarena to be able to get some DH days potentially and stay off his feet, which might keep him fresh and a little less streaky throughout the course of his contract year season. Overall, this is a guy that's pretty much an average defender but can play multiple spots. He's a utility type and is a pretty good hitter, especially against right-handed pitching. He's below average against lefties, and you probably don't want him to face a ton of lefties. But against righties, he would lead off for you, and he would be a good addition. He has 2 years of club control, is in his second ARB year this year in 2026. 2026 will be his age 29 season. Donovan is my favorite because you can mix him around and allow young guys to still get play time. But I also do like that he might platoon well with Ben Williamson at third base. He would be able to lead off for you, which is a valuable asset, and he doesn't strike out a lot, which is something that the Mariners' offense would definitely like. The question is, what would he cost? There's been rumors of a Durangelo Stanza or Lazaro Montes being the headliner, and if that's the case, and it's one of those guys plus like a Ty Pete and a Michael Morales or a Teddy McGraw, consider me all over it. You don't know what that trade package is going to look like, and you don't know what it would look like for any of these guys until or if they are traded. But out of these three guys, Brendan Donovan, Brandon Lown, Ketel Marte, Brendan Donovan to me is the best fit. He's the most likely to be a Mariner. He's the most likely to be traded. And he's my favorite of the three. Let me know in the comments which is your favorite of these three trade targets, or if you have another one that you like better or would maybe like me to cover in the future, leave that down below. Make sure you like and subscribe on the video. Leave 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been episode 104 of the show. Till next time, which will hopefully be soon with a Brendan Donovan trade. Cross your fingers. Signing off, and thank you for listening. It's Mahal. Go M's, and peace.